Mr. Soni, let me come to you. Mr. Soni, let me come to you first. With the Supreme Court making all of these points absolutely clear, do you expect, firstly, IPL TV rights, which were supposed to be announced next week, which could be worth billions of dollars, could that be impacted because the Supreme Court says an auditor needs to oversee the signing of all BCCI big contracts? So is that likely to be affected firstly?
I think it may be delayed a little, but it will not be affected because that contract is a must for BCCI and court understands it, and with the auditor appointed now, and when Mr. Thakur and Mr. Shirke would meet on 3rd and talk in court, I think this matter would be resolved. But the decision which was to be taken on 25th October, it may be delayed a little.
In fact, Mr. Soni, let me ask you the next question as well. Now, the directive is that there needs to be an independent auditor to scrutinize all the BCCI's accounts. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong, and I think BCCI is very clean. They've got clean auditors also. So let us see, if Supreme Court wants it audited, it will be done. But it doesn't affect this contract. Audit can go on, but this contract could be as a separate issue where the auditor could also become a party in it. It entirely depends how the BCCI executive decides or how the president and the secretary take a call on it.
No, but sir, the executive or the president, they don't have a say in it. That's the point over here. In fact, that's why the Supreme Court has today hit out against Anurag Thakur and have said, and let me quote, effort made by the BCCI president to question the legitimacy of the Lodha recommendations. There was no occasion to question the induction of a comptroller and auditor general nominee after the court accepted it. It's a different point. But I think, Mr. Soni, what I'm referring to is non-compliance by the BCCI. Mr. Soni, I will come back to you in a moment. Let me go across to Kishore Bhimani. Sir, the larger issue over here is, it appears to some, is of the BCCI saying, yes, of course we welcome transparency. Yes, of course our auditors are transparent. Yes, of course we want change. But at the end of the day, there is this back and forth with the Supreme Court because they simply don't want fundamental change. Is that your interpretation as well?
Vishnu, may I say, in addition to what you have mentioned, today this contract, which obviously concerns the IPL, do you realize that this is where all the trouble began in the IPL the last time? You remember the MSM, Singapore, Mauritius, Mr. Lalit Modi and the allegations about the $80 million. You remember all those different things which everyone who follows the IPL knows. That the humongous amount of money that was being laid across the table, the amount of commissions and kickbacks that were being paid or alleged to have been paid, the way that it went to two different entities was all about TV coverage. It was all about these rights. It involved Mr. Lalit Modi, then Commissioner of the IPL. And today, I believe that in their wisdom, Justice Lodha and the other gentlemen who preside over this have realized that let's catch it by the throat. This whole thing, the carotid artery must be kept, and this is it. Money is the root of all evil in this particular game. Today, the more the money, the more astronomical the sums at hand, the larger the temptation for corruption. As to your question about appointment of audit, aren't auditors appointed in everything? Today, a thing that has hundreds of millions of dollars turnover should have a body of auditors who have a reputation and who will look at it and who will tell the government involved and the Supreme Court that something is smelly in the state of Denmark.
Or not smelly, or not smelly at all. I mean, it's one of the two. That's what an independent auditor would do, give an independent assessment. Let's also, I think, not assume that there would necessarily be corruption. There have been instances of corruption in the past. Hopefully, it will be clean in the future. Tehseen Poonawalla, I've been reading your tweets, and you believe that, you know, the Supreme Court shouldn't be involved, perhaps, in running the day-to-day functions of the Cricket Board of India. But I think the reason the Supreme Court is being as proactive as it is because, one example, only 2 state boards have implemented the Lodha report, Tripura and Vidarbha, which is why the Supreme Court has now given deadlines and have said, you come back after you implement all of the changes that we want. State boards are not ready to listen to a Supreme Court directive. The Supreme Court is now threatening action against the president of the BCCI. So where does that leave us? I mean, how can you say that the BCCI is okay and all the Supreme Court shouldn't be involved?
Vishnu, I have never said that the BCCI is okay. And let me begin from where Mr. Bhimani left off. Let's use the example that Mr. Bhimani gave, the IPL, which you started with. Even if there is, as Mr. Bhimani uses the word, alleged corruption in IPL or any part of the BCCI, that comes under the CRPC. Please investigate it, take action against the guilty. But you cannot throw the baby out of the bathwater. When Mr. Bhimani said the problem is there is too much money in cricket, the problem in other sports, we lament, is there is no money in those other sports. Nobody can deny BCCI is a well-run organization, and cricket is one sport India does well at. Let's leave that point aside. Now come to the other point that you have raised. The fact of the matter is, and I humbly say this with folded hands before the majesty of the Honorable Supreme Court, I believe the Supreme Court has crossed its line when it comes to the BCCI. The BCCI is registered under the Societies Act in Tamil Nadu. There are different clubs that are associated or different members associated with the BCCI registered under different acts. The Supreme Court is overriding all of those.
Yes,
that creates jurisdiction problems. And coming to the Lodha report, I personally believe some of the implementations of some of the recommendations of the Lodha committee
you can of course legally apply your view on what the Supreme Court is saying, but the fact of the matter is it really doesn't matter, because the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has decided that one way or the other the cleanup must happen. The cleanup is not happening. So in as much as you can raise
excellent point, except
it's a moot point.
Except Vishnu,
it's not being done. A directive has been given. It's not being done.
I'll answer that.
Yeah,
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
But you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. Point number one.
But how
point
is
number
the baby
two.
Been thrown out? That's rhetoric. That's rhetoric, Tehsil.
No, it's not rhetoric. It's not rhetoric. Let me finish. Why just the BCCI? Why not then the Lodha committee recommendations apply to all sporting federations across the country?
Because it's then the BCCI which is allegedly corrupt.
What defines... Let me finish, make my point. How do you know that they don't get grants? Where is the auditing done out there? Has the Supreme Court gone
talking about the BCCI? No, we're not talking about other federations which have their own problems.
Precisely making my point. Okay. You're precisely making my point. The BCCI has come under a spotlight because it's a glamorous and rich organization. The other ones where there may be corruption but are not so glamorous or do not have so much money are not under the spotlight.
Every single sporting federation in the Indian Olympic movement has come under the spotlight as well for incredible instances of nepotism, of corruption, of a lack of sporting spirit. Yeah, the International Olympic Association has taken action against them. India almost didn't participate in the Olympics. There is corruption widespread in Indian sport. It starts it certainly exists in the BCCI. So I don't know if it's fair to say that, look, why Lodha committee for only BCCI, why don't we have it for other sports? There is a massive movement to clean up sport in India. You can argue that it's not working, that's a separate issue.
Vishnu, now you're on a rhetoric, but let me correct you on one fact. You got one fact wrong. The International Olympic Association asked India not to participate precisely because of government interference, not the other way around as you say it. Point number one. Point number two, and the more important point, Vishnu, out here is, if the BCCI is going to consider, if the BCCI is considered a public authority by the Supreme Court, and that has not been defined completely what a public authority is, though the Supreme Court in its wisdom considers the BCCI to, then where does the definition of public authority begin and end? Why are news channels not public authority? Why are other associations not public authority? Why are other federations not public authority? And that's going to create further complications. Okay. I go back to my earlier point. The Lodha committee recommendations cannot and should not be implemented in totality. It cannot happen.
Shishir Ratangadi, do you agree that the Supreme Court, while obviously we are not criticizing the Supreme Court over here, we're just trying to understand what the points being raised by the Supreme Court are. Tehsin Poonawalla arguing that, look, there needs to be a division between what the Supreme Court does and how a cricket board needs to be run. Do you believe, Shishir, that is a correct perspective, or do you believe that the rot in Indian cricket is so deep that there needs to be a Supreme Court intervention?
Look, Vishnu, there was a rot. It came to this. I mean, if there wasn't a rot, it wouldn't have come to this day today. And today is a landmark day by any standards. The fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has told the BCCI, you align, execute, or you perish. And it's very clear. I mean, the fact is, I've been a cricketer. I mean, I feel ashamed that, you know, the institute that I represented as a cricketer today is going through the embarrassment. And why is it going through the embarrassment? It's going through the embarrassment because it's a cozy club. It's because that, you know, they haven't been transparent. They haven't opened out to the public that pays for the game. And that is an issue. You know, we can go into rhetoric, we can go into the past, but the fact is, today, the Lodha Commission has come to certain conclusions by interviewing, asking people. This has not come out of a figment of their imagination that they've put down these recommendations. They have interviewed enough people for and against the BCCI to come to this judgment or this resolution. And today, the onus is on the institution and the establishment to adhere to it. They've been waiting and they've been buying time, but it's too late now.
Yeah.
You should have gone up to the Lodha Commission and explained to them a while ago about what you needed to do to get things in order.
Okay.
But you didn't reply to their mails, you didn't correspond with them, and today you're in a situation where you've got to say, I have to execute whatever they have recommended, otherwise anyway we are a dead duck.
And you know, that's important because there could be action taken by the Supreme Court against Anurag Thakur. That statement made by the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court could decide on action against Thakur later on. And the Supreme Court says Mr. Thakur questioned the legitimacy of the Lodha Committee's recommendations, and that is unacceptable to the Supreme Court, and yet the arguments continue. Saad bin Jang, you've been waiting very patiently. Why don't you jump in over here? And perhaps reflect on this. Only 2 state boards have implemented the Lodha report, Tripura and Vidarbha. This is unreal. Who doesn't follow the orders of the Supreme Court? I mean, the courage of these boards to actually defy the Supreme Court is something else, but they've not done it. And this means they're not going to get any funds to state associations because the Supreme Court has turned off the tap as of today. So what is the BCCI, in your opinion, pushing for over here? Are they looking to just sort of go down with a fight, or I mean, is this the beginning of the change of Indian cricket and the BCCI as we know it?
Vishnu, listen, if the Hyderabad Cricket Association listens to what the Supreme Court is saying, at least 6 people will go to jail. There are 199 cases pending against the old test players, including test players, first-class players, secretaries, officials. The ACB has gone quiet. We don't know why they haven't so far convicted them or FIRs have been filed. The moment the Supreme Court comes in and lifts the cover, lifts the protection of the politicians away from the BCCI, then you're going to see a lot of heads roll, and that's one of the reasons why everyone, including the president and the secretary at the very top of the BCCI, they are hoping that some political solution will work out. I mean, now, as far as Mr. Thakur, Anurag Thakur is concerned, I wish that he would view the time till the 3rd of December as a cricket lover and not as a son of a chief minister, not as a politician, and I wish he'd view it in the proper perspective of the spirit of the game. And if you remember, when the Supreme Court first started looking into the matters of the board, they brought out 2 things, the spirit of the game, and therefore they stuck with the spirit of the law, and so far you've always seen them being extremely fair and sometimes overtly fair. And there's another draconian monster sitting over there called the monopoly. Yeah. Now, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, they have pointed this out to the state and said, listen, there's a monopoly there, do something. What does the state do? Nothing. And why does the state do nothing? Because the politicians are sitting there grabbing everything and not allowing anything to happen. So this corruption that starts, which, by the way, doesn't start from the board level itself. It has become, because nobody's taken any decisions, the clubs in Hyderabad now, there was a sting operation done, the clubs in Hyderabad now, the club owners are taking money to allow batsmen to open the bowling or open the batting. So the corruption has gone so far down into the system that we need a Supreme Court to take out a danda and say, "Sala, aap log baat karna hai, suno, nahi to on the 3rd of December, I suppose,
potentially go to jail or get fines." Bimal Soni, let me come back to you. One of the things that the states need to accept is there needs to be 1 man, 1 post for a 3-year term, and then there is a cooling off period. Is that one of the big concerns that that a lot of the executive members of the BCCI and state associations, they've been there forever, they earn a great deal of money, they don't want to let go of their post, and that is where the nepotism is really based. Mr. Soni.
well, the rule is for all, and as far as I think, if Lodha Commission has to implement Supreme Court's orders, they have to do it, and we have to agree with them. If we try and be nasty now, I think board will be the loser.
Now, sir, you are not following the instructions. There are so many things that the BCCI has not accepted. In the past, for example, we saw this entire problem when the Lodha Commission had put an age limit of 70, but then the BCCI had problems in actually accepting that. Then the Supreme Court had to say, BCCI people are behaving like lords, fall in line, otherwise we will make you fall in line. BCCI is bringing the system in disrepute by not following the directions. BCCI considers itself a law in itself. The BCCI tactics are in poor taste. Sir, this is what the Supreme Court is saying. One quote after the other after the other. So, Mr. Soni, when you are today saying that, look, the BCCI will have to do because the Supreme Court has given an order, the BCCI is doing nothing.
Well, BCCI has now filed a review petition which has been dismissed.
Precisely.
So what alternative they have got now? I think they have to follow the instructions. What Supreme Court has said. They may have their problems in implementation, they may have their viewpoints, but if Supreme Court is not agreeing, we have to accept what Supreme Court has said. That is the situation today. Otherwise, there will be contempt of court, there will be certain actions taken. So I don't want the cricket administration to collapse. Yes, there could be few points where the elder statesmen in BCCI would not agree with the Supreme Court order. But if it's an order, it has to be followed.
Yeah.
And I think now board should not delay and they should implement the recommendations of Lodha Commission as soon as possible.
Mr. Bhimani, I'm running out of time. Quick word from you. There is the England tour next week. No money to state boards is what the Supreme Court has said until they comply with the Lodha recommendations. The one-day series is currently underway. I don't know how that's going to be impacted. What about the England tour next month? Do you think that is in trouble?
May I tell it?
Mr. Bhimani?
Vishnu, let me say it very briefly. Number one, I'd just like to take issue with Mr. Pudawala's comment about money. Look, nobody grudges cricket board the money. There can be millions, hundreds of millions involved. The fact is they have misused it. The fact is they've used it as power. What Sadbin Jung and others said about this Hyderabad Cricket Association, that began because of Srinivasan's iron control over money, and today he could pass the baton over to Hyderabad because he had money control. Now, I just want to let it be at that, because when there's billions involved, people are not going to fight against that. As far as this suggestion that one-day internationals or matches held by associations, don't tell me they'll be stymied because of lack of funds. Okay. Believe me, Cricket Association of Bengal and the Maharashtra Cricket Association and so on, Bombay Cricket Association, these associations are super rich. I mean, CAB, Cricket Association of Bengal, is one of the richest in the country. Today, they will be able to hold matches, but the fact of the huge sums coming in, huge sums going out, and this tremendous autocratic control over it, that will be stymied for a while. And the Supreme Court will be able to lay down the fact that they are in charge, and they are not going to allow this to happen. They are not going to run cricket.
Okay, sir, running out of time. Sadbin Jung, 30 seconds. You wanted to come in. Go ahead, Mr. Jung, with your point.
Yes. Vishnu, quickly. Okay, now listen, in the 90s there was a shift from, 80s and 90s there was a shift from amateur to professional cricket, and what happened, match fixing came in, all betting came in, and the players had to actually go through a huge correction process with a lot of issues that they had to really contend with. Now betting, setting, etc. Now the same thing is happening to the corporate world, to the management system. They are shifting away from this amateur, very amateurish management of the BCCI, and now it needs a professional setup. So exactly the way the players have suffered, I think a few heads will also roll in the BCCI administrative setup, and I think professionalism will come in because the court is extremely proactive. The court will not let even one day's cricket suffer.
Okay, Mr. Jung and everybody else, sorry Tehseen couldn't come back to you, completely out of time, Mr. Tangadi, I'm sorry, you've actually spoken least in this program, that's my fault, I apologize for that. Completely out of time, but one way or the other, if the Supreme Court has decided the BCCI has to fall in line, I think for the interest of cricketers and for cricket and for the cricket-loving public in this country, this clean-up act will be quick and soon, and that cricket is not disrupted in this country. I think all of us on this panel hope that that is the case. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. Goodbye.